Welcome to Weight Loss and Wellness for Real, the podcast where people like you get the practical solutions and support you need to permanently lose the physical and mental weight so you can feel better and live the life you really want to live in the body and mind you really want to be living in. If you're looking to overcome your stress eating, overeating, binging behaviors, and move to a place of food and body freedom, as well as find more meaning and more moments of joy in life, you are in the right place. Hey everyone, thanks for being here, sharing this space with me today. Just a reminder, you can head to my website, heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. You can head over there and sign up for my free monthly newsletter on all things well-being. I also always include a high protein recipe, and there are also discount codes included for different products that help support the show. I do have with me today a very special guest. His name is Eric Edmeades, and he is a very interesting person. You're really going to enjoy this. He's a wonderful storyteller. He is also a global citizen with a unique perspective on life. He was born in South Africa, raised in Canada. He's traveled all over the world. He has done things from mobile computing to Hollywood special effects. I know the studio that he used to own did work with Avatar and the Pirates of the Caribbean. But he is here today because he's not just this incredible entrepreneur. He also started a program called WILDFIT. And so this is all things health and wellness and why he is here. WILDFIT has improved the lives of over 100,000 people in more than 130 countries, really a testament to his innovative approach to health and well-being. I heard about Eric. I saw him interviewed by Jordan Peterson this summer and sort of was interested in what he had to say there. And so started following him and kind of got more information. And he and I really have very similar philosophies on helping people to live their best lives, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. So he has an upcoming book called The Evolution Gap, A Survival Guide for Modern Civilization. We talk about that in this interview, and you can purchase it. There are digital copies available on Amazon. You can purchase it there. He did ask if you do that to leave a review, but it will be coming out in paper form, in real book form soon. And he also has another book that is going to be released the end of March called Post-Diabetic. So he has those two books coming out. His work on the evolution gap, it really explores the growing divide between our slow-moving biological evolution and our extraordinary capacity to innovate rapidly. So during our conversation, Eric's going to share some insights on this, which also can be applied on a practical level to health and well-being, weight loss. We do talk about diet. We talk about veganism, carnivore. We get into all of it. So I want you to really take a close listen, try to pull some things out of this episode that you can maybe start to incorporate today, something that feels doable, something you can do on the daily. Really hoping this episode and the conversation with Eric will help inspire you to make some changes in your daily life. Well, nice to meet you. I'm a fan, so it's kind of fun to have you here.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I saw your interview with Jordan Peterson, and yeah, so from that started kind of just got involved in some of your stuff and started following you. And we have really, really similar philosophies.
I saw from your podcast.
So great to
that
have
was
you
a
here.
super fun experience with Jordan. He's a good man.
So wondering if maybe you just start out sharing. I know you had some illness as a kiddo, and that was kind of your first introduction to food as maybe healing. Maybe you could start there.
So, the funny thing about being ill when you're a kid is that if it creeps up on you slowly, you don't really know that you're ill. You just think you're you. So
yeah,
I always had it, allergies. I was a little overweight. Then I developed acne, and these things just all became part of my identity. I didn't think of myself as being ill, but my parents, they did. And so, I came from a medical family. So it was like, let's go see the doctor. Let's get the next script. Let's try the next pill, the next injection, the next inhalant. Right. Eventually surgery was on the cards. And then funny enough, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar in Vancouver, Canada. And, mostly he talked about communication and state management and all this other stuff. But on the last day, he kind of went on this path about food, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then in the time after that, I started kind of looking into it a little bit, because I always thought of myself as like just average, not unhealthy,
Right.
just.
Right.
And then I decided to do an experiment, and I cut out a few things and I added a few things, and no kidding, in 30 days I dropped 35 pounds, which I was 21
That's
years old. I mean,
amazing. That's
that's a big
amazing.
deal.
Hmm.
And all of my symptoms went away. I was breathing through my sinuses for the first time in a decade. My acne
Mm.
went away. My digestive problems went away. And of course, I didn't need the surgery.
Yeah.
And that began my whole journey. And that wasn't enough, though. There was one more moment that really kicked the journey underway. And that was my doctor trying to convince me to still have the surgery. So,
Oh,
the
of
doctor's office
course.
called me and like, well, you're feeling better now, but
Right. Right.
the symptoms could come back and you don't want to end up on the waiting list again. And it's like,
Right.
and I had
Yes.
this feeling inside. They were like a used car salesman trying to.
Uh-huh.
And so I went into I went to the doctor's office, and I had a checkup and stuff. And I obviously looked different. I was no
Hmm.
longer sick. I was no longer ill in any way. And not once did they ask me how that happened. And then I asked my doctor, and I said, listen, it was kind of an impetuous question, but I'm like, how long did you go to medical school for? 6 years? And he says, well, I said, well, in that 6 years, how much of that time did you devote to nutrition?
Hmm.
And I got the shock of my life. I mean, these days, I think people know this, but we're talking 30 years
Y-
ago. Like when he told me they didn't study nutrition at all, not even
Yeah.
hours, never mind days or weeks, I
Yeah.
felt like
Not one class.
I felt like I was on a plane and I just found out the pilot never learned to land the thing.
So that was kind of the start of recognizing, okay, doctors maybe don't have all the expertise in the world, and it really sounds like taking ownership then of your own health as well.
Yeah, at that point, I kind of recognized that if somebody else, if they weren't going to learn to fly the plane, I was going to have to figure it out myself. And so
Yeah.
uh, I did. I started doing all kinds of research and reading and studying whatever I could, and just I was just insanely curious about it. And luckily, I had a job that paid me really well, and gave me the resources to
That's
dive into
great.
these things in a bigger way. And then another big thing kind of hit me, and it was that um, as I really narrowed down what I thought were like foundational key nutritional principles. Obviously had a lot of my friends asking me how I did what I did, because
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I looked so different that my mom didn't recognize me picking me up at the airport. Like
Oh,
it was a
seriously, that extreme.
completely different look. Because remember, and you
Hmm.
know this, I mean, you've seen it with, I'm
Hmm.
sure many of your clients, is like, it's one thing that you lose weight and look different, but the other thing is that you lose inflammation. And
Yes.
so you get this
Your
like,
facial
puffiness,
features. Yes.
so I changed so much, my mom couldn't even recognize me.
Wow.
And so my friends were all asking me like, what did you do? How did you do it? They were a little like that woman in Harry Met Sally. I'll have what he's having.
Right. Right.
And,
Yeah.
and so I started trying to help people with that.
Hmm.
And it just didn't work, and it didn't work, not because my nutritional principles were off base. It didn't work because they didn't want it bad enough, or
Yeah.
something, in
The
particular,
behavior
one friend of
piece.
mine lost about 30 some odd pounds over about a month, and he was doing
Hmm.
really, really well, same track as I was on. And he
Hmm.
needed it. Like he really needed
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
And then I didn't see him for a while. And the next thing I know, he's put the 30 back on, and plus another
Yeah.
10. And and he had headed over toward morbid obesity. And I asked him about it, and he's like, well, everything in moderation, you got to live,
Hmm.
all the
Oh,
cliched,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
signs you're headed toward lifestyle disease. And that led me on a different journey. And I think in many ways it's been similar to yours, is that
Hmm.
I started asking the question of, why is it people don't eat what they know they should, and why is it that people
Yeah,
do eat what they know they shouldn't?
yeah.
And so I developed, let's say, an offshoot of traditional psychology that you might now call
Hmm.
food psychology,
Hmm.
and decided to marry those things together to try to create lasting results for people instead of asking them to use willpower.
So really getting into more of the behavioral
Yeah,
aspect. That's the question that I think I know for my clients, they're always asking, and something I was always so curious about of why do we do the things that we don't want to do and don't do the things that we want to do,
yeah,
and how do you intervene with that and actually make the real changes that last? Yeah.
yeah.
So then I do know another part of your story here where you have spent a lot of time, and I'll bring this back around to the food stuff too, but with the Hazda tribe. I know a lot of people would love to hear some of those stories, but also how did that have an influence then on how you kind of came to create, and we'll talk about WildFit, but the whole kind of program that you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, it was foundational. So the
Okay.
background is that I at that point had started running a leadership communication seminar, and I'd seen lots of people running seminars, and they use things like Tony uses firewalking, and some
Right,
people
right.
use board breaking, and I wanted
Yeah,
a
like those ritual things.
yeah, and I wanted a metaphor that was a lot more like life. Like firewalking's
Mm,
a fabulous experience, but that's not life. That's a
right.
decision, taking action. And so I had climbed Kilimanjaro some years earlier, and I realized that
Mm,
that might have been the single most powerful personal development thing I'd ever done. And
yeah,
so I thought, what
right.
if I wrapped that in a context? And so I developed a program, a leadership program, and part of that was taking people up Kilimanjaro. So we did 7 of these expeditions.
Oh,
And
cool.
on one of those expeditions, my local logistics partner, I think it was the second one, and he maybe even the first one, I have to look back, but he said, "Hey, I Googled you and I saw that you have this interest in anthropology and human history. And of course, my great grandfather had found the oldest Homo sapien skull. So
Oh,
I
I
was
I
very into
remember
this stuff."
listening about that, hearing that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he says, "Well, would you like to go meet some Bushmen?" And I'm like,
Mhm.
"Excuse me, pardon me, what?" Like
Yeah.
I knew that they existed, and I'd seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, which is a
Oh,
must
that's one of
watch
my
in my
favorite
opinion.
movies. That was
Isn't it
I'm sorry,
phenomenal?
I just have to interject. That was my first movie that on my birthday that I got to take friends to a movie theater and see.
Oh,
That's so
that's so
funny. I have
cool.
not thought of that movie in years. Yeah.
Well, those are genuine. There's a genuine Khoisan Bushman. I mean, that's what's
Yeah.
amazing about that movie.
Yeah.
And so I'd known about them, and I I'm from South Africa, so I was aware of the
Right.
history and all this stuff. And then he says, "Well, we've got the Hadzabe people here in East Africa. They're very similar to the Khoisan. Would you like to meet some?" And so we go looking for them. And this is 15 years ago. Now there are tour companies that can take
Yeah,
you to
I
go and have
know.
an experience,
I know.
but not
Different
like.
though 15 years ago.
Yeah, it was a little different. And so we eventually met up with one tribe, and sadly, they had converted in the last 10 years, they'd converted
Mhm.
to alcohol, tobacco, and
Oh,
agriculture. And
wow.
you could see it on them. I mean, none of them were healthy. But then we found our way deeper into Lake Yasi, and we stumbled upon our first Hadzabe tribe. And
Mm,
it was stunning. And
mm.
maybe one of the best ways to describe the impact it had on me is to tell a different story. And that was that one of
Okay.
my guides, Gasper, he's a very good friend of mine. He's a very good man. And on our second trip there, he said to me, "Why do you keep coming back? This is like some people come here one time. The scientists come, they do their study.
Mhm.
The odd back then, the very adventurous person might, but nobody comes back. They get their Instagram
Mhm.
picture, and that's all they need,
Right,
right?
right, right. Sure.
Why are you
Get all the
back?"
likes. Yeah.
And I told him that I'm working on this concept called the evolution gap. And I
Mhm.
told him that I'm working on this idea that to a large degree, people living out in the what we might call developed world are suffering some sort of like nature deprivation syndrome. And so
Yeah.
that there are things we could learn from the Hadzabe people, like look at the way they eat, they exercise. And he says, "So
Mhm.
you think that if we ate more like they ate, we'd be healthier?" And I go, "Well, that's an
Mm.
oversimplification, but sure."
Mhm.
And that was
Mhm.
the end of that. For the next couple of years, he pesters me to go visit this school that he's building. And I will tell you something. When you climb
Yeah.
Kilimanjaro, every porter, every guide has a school, a library, or an
Sure.
orphanage because they have figured out the language to get better tips.
Sure.
I'm not
Of
saying
course.
some of them don't have a school. Most of them don't.
Yeah.
And so Gasper keeps doing this, and I'm like, "Oh, Gasper, we have such a friendship and such a, there's a lot of trust between us. Why do you need this
Mhm.
manipulation? I give you good tips. We don't need it." And then we're doing one trip, and we have this long itinerary, and I notice there's like a 4-hour gap in one of the days, and I don't understand. I go, "Gasper, what's with this 4-hour gap?" And he goes, "No kidding." He goes like, "Oh my, there is a gap there. I guess we could stop off at my school." So of course we go to his school. He finally
It's
wins,
great.
right? Well,
Right. Yeah.
I got to his school. Now, before I say what happened there, I've been to many schools in Tanzania because we've often taken gifts and taken money and donations. And,
Sure.
and I can tell you that at every school I've been to, particularly government schools, the children there are not healthy. They
Yeah.
live almost 100% on ugali, which, is either corn or maize meal. There's no fruit and
Yeah.
vegetables. There's no meat. Their little bellies are distended. Their eyes are watering. They're runny nose. They're not healthy. I got
Mm-hmm.
to Gasper School, and the kids were unbelievable. They had muscles, and
Really?
they were fast, and they were strong, and their
Really?
eyes were sharp, and they were
Yeah.
lean in a good, healthy way. And I turned to him and I go, "Why are your kids so different than the others?"
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "You don't remember?" I go, "Remember what?" And he goes, "5 years
Mm.
ago, you and I sat around the fire, and you told me that if we close the gap between us and the Hadzabe people, if we combine the best of civilization and the best of the Hadzabe, and so these children get meat twice a week, they
Oh,
get fruits
that
and
gives me
vegetables, and
goosebumps.
that's why they look like this." That is what I'm trying to
Wow.
do for the rest of the world.
Yeah, I love it. And you are on the mission. It's a great mission. So when you had those experiences, and you kind of had that idea rolling about the evolution gap, is that something then that have you been able to take that back and apply to your real life? Is that where WildFit came in? How did that all work?
Yeah, it really did. I mean, the evolution gap is a much bigger conversation than it is about food. Food is just
Yeah,
one chapter. So let me define properly
that'd
the
be great.
evolution gap. The evolution gap is a gap that I suggest exists between our biological genetic evolution and our capacity for innovation,
Yeah.
technological and social innovation. And so the way evolution, natural selection typically works is that it works in lockstep with the response of your environment. So if you're a cheetah and you're living in the savannah, and then there's, let's say, the polar caps are melting and there's more water coming into Africa, and now the savannah turns into bushland, then what happens is that a new set of genes get adopted, and the cheetahs end up with big splotchy black marks on them
Yeah,
instead of little
right.
dots. Then, when the savannah turns back into a grassland, the cheetah slowly, but this happens
Mm.
over tens of thousands of years.
Yeah.
If the gazelle is a tiny little bit faster this week than the cheetah, they a tiny incremental adjustment.
Hmm.
Then all of a sudden, there came this moment where we started lifting ourselves away from the natural selection conversation. We started lifting ourselves away from the selective pressures of nature. We developed tools, and like you can imagine that the first time somebody imagined that they could throw a rock at something they were hunting, that's a big
Right. Right.
upgrade. I mean, if you were
Hmm.
in the up in the mountains in Canada, and you saw a grizzly pick up a rock and throw it at a moose, you'd be pretty impressed. It's a big
Yeah,
jump.
exactly.
And
Exactly.
and then there's the next jump of sharpening those rocks. And then there's the jump of, well, what if we used a long stick and sharpen it and we put some kind of poison on it? Wait a minute. What about a bow and arrow? I'm pretty convinced
Right.
it took some psychedelics to figure that one out. But the point
Might
is
have.
that, yeah, but you can see that each of these technological changes would have changed their relationship with nature. And
Yeah.
it would have changed it faster than our ability to genetically evolve alongside that. That's where the gap is. And I would suggest that almost all of the pain and suffering that we have at an individual, social, and even global level owes itself to that gap. And here's a great example of it. We evolved a heart, and we evolved
Hmm.
a heart as a mechanism for pumping oxygen around our body because we need that. We need it urgently. We need it every
Right.
minute. We need it all the time. So the heart is always there. Ba boom, ba boom, ba boom. And equally, we evolved a diaphragm. The diaphragm is pulling the air in, and it's a pump. We need to have it. Our
Hmm.
lymphatic system, we need to have that. We need to
Right.
have lymphatic flow to cleanse all of the cells inside our body. But for some reason, God or Darwin forgot to give it a pump. There's no pump.
Right.
People
It's like,
sitting around at their desk in
hmm.
their car watching Netflix, and they're not moving their lymph at all because there's no pump. This seems
Right.
like a flaw, but it isn't a flaw because our ancestors were required to walk 10 or 20 miles a day, every single day, and to lift and to dig and to climb. So what they did was they regularly contracted and relaxed muscles constantly, which is the pump. You
Sure.
are the pump for your
Right.
lymphatic
Right.
system. But our modern lifestyle is where the evolution gap opens up and exposes a major problem. And that is that the average person walking around today, the average person living today, is not cleansing efficiently from the inside.
Yeah. Beautiful example of that. I think too about, back when, right now, I'm just thinking about diabetes and where that's all going, but how back in the day, there would have been some benefit to be able to have that higher blood sugar. You know what? I mean, it would have been some survival.
You're dead on. You're dead on. I mean, I see the constant glucose monitor trend.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to be clear. I'm not saying they're without utility, but I'm saying that for most people, they're using them incorrectly, in my very humble opinion.
Sure. Sure.
You're free to do what you want. But what I keep hearing from friends of mine that are using them is it's like, oh, I noticed that if I eat this, I get this big glycemic spike. But if I eat this, I don't. As if a glycemic spike is a bad thing.
Right.
And my view of that is that if you and I were 20,000 years ago walking through sub-Saharan Africa and we stumbled upon a bush full of fruit, guess what we're about to have?
Yeah.
A glycemic spike. And we're meant to have it. The problem isn't the individual glycemic spike. The problem is the consistent consumption of carbohydrates without any seasonal constraint. That's where the real problem comes in. And you're absolutely right. Diabetes sits firmly in the evolution gap. And it basically works like this. We evolved 3 core metabolic modes that are designed to get us through each of the seasons and to utilize those seasons. So, you know, the minute there's carbohydrate food availability, we enter into the metabolic mode of autumn, and there's carbohydrate foods. And here's what happens. And everybody recognizes this pattern. I eat some carbs, so I crave more carbs. Yes, because that was a survival strategy. It was like a super important survival strategy.
Well, I love that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. No, you go.
It's just, then you start to store a little bit of glycogen and a little bit of fat. Again, you have to, because what's coming after autumn? It's winter. And so, then you move into winter and you move to another metabolic mode, and then you move to spring and you move to another metabolic mode. But the average person never leaves the metabolic mode of fall, and they're not even eating good quality carbs in fall. They're in something you might call junk fall.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Yes, yeah. I like that whole idea of the different seasons of eating. And so do you relate that to the actual seasons that we experience? Because I'm thinking, because I was going to say we're all in different seasons. I mean, wherever we live so you're talking metaphorically in a way.
I speak about this often, and I've been speaking about it for over 10 years. And then people hear a snippet on a social channel, and then they go and tell their clients, some influencer, I see them. They go, oh, you got to eat seasonally. If you live in the Arctic Circle, that's a very different seasonal, situation than if you live in Minnetonka versus Costa Rica, whatever.
Right.
So what we're really on about here is that humans, we spent, like, say, 99.99% of our history in sub-Saharan Africa. So our systems, our metabolic modes evolved to cope with those seasons.
Sure.
And so, so the idea here is not to think so much about what season you're in. The idea here is to think what result you want, and then understand that you can stimulate the metabolic mode that you evolved, and you can stimulate that mode to get the result you want.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So I also like the message that you give, because it's a little bit where people are at right now. I mean, we really are in a health crisis, and where a lot of people are at, this idea of, because of this evolution gap, it takes some of the, I'm not saying I believe everybody has a responsibility to their own health, but maybe some of the blame. I mean, I work with lots of clients where, I see firsthand, I'm in deep relationship with them. I see firsthand the struggle of someone who is overweight and how hard they try. And even, doing so many of the right things, all these things, but just can't get it off. And to me, there's so many environmental triggers. We have a whole industries around that. I like the message of, this is kind of hardwired within us to seek out sugar, to, whatever it is.
I would say this. If you or anybody that's listening, if you're overweight, or you have type 2 diabetes, or you have a lifestyle disease, let me just say something really cleanly. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
It is in no way your fault, but it is completely and only your responsibility to do something about it now. That's the harsh thing. Now, the reason it's not your fault is that, first of all, as you've just rightly pointed out, we are living with an evolutionary mismatch. So we're living in an environment that's different than our genes. So that makes it difficult already. But worse than that, the food industry has hijacked our instincts and hijacked our emotional states for their profit. So, you know, as a very good example, you're with a sports team, you know, high school sports team, and they went to go play in the championship and they lost. Now you're all in the bus and you're headed home, you know, from the game, and everybody's sad. Some people might even be crying, and you're sitting there, you're the coach, you feel bad, and all you want to do, because you're a loving, nurturing, caring human being, is make everybody in the bus feel better. And you've already tried telling them it doesn't matter if we win or lose, it's how we played, and you guys were amazing, and you've done all the right things, but you can't get there. And so you're like, we're going to pull in for pizza. We're going to pull in for pizza, Cokes, and ice cream. And so they pull in. And of course, that does lift their mood. First, the decision to do it. Okay, guys, let's go get some beer, or, you know, beer, maybe not beer, but let's go get some, you know, some pizza and Cokes and stuff. And the minute you announce that, everybody starts producing serotonin and dopamine.
Yes.
And then you walk in there and you eat this high caloric load. And remember, the body just thinks calories are wonderful no matter which ones you put in. The body's like, oh, calories. So more serotonin and more dopamine. And what's happened in that moment is that Pizza Hut, or whoever it is, has now successfully hijacked those children's emotional states. And so for the rest of their lives, because this was a very peak moment, they're going to have a bad day at the office one day, and they're going to have this, like, this is the day to pull in and get pizza. And the food industry has been playing this game, and then also manipulating our food guidelines, you know, telling us that, oh, you don't have to cut your calories, you just have to bicycle them away. Right.
You just have to move more. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been deeply manipulated by the food industry in order to boost their profitability. And so, and then, by the way, I'm going to, this is where I probably should put my tinfoil hat on to say this next part, because it's going to sound conspiracy theory like, but listen, in the 1970s, the tobacco industry started to recognize that they had a major problem. And that problem was that people were getting very, very sick from their products and dying, and that likely individual lawsuits and class action lawsuits were going to happen. And they knew that.
Yeah.
Now, when as a large, you know, multi-million, billion-dollar corporation, if you start thinking about the damage of an individual suit like that, this is a major threat to your business. You're talking about settlements that were in the 10, 20, 30, even $100 million range. So they didn't want that. There are two ways to manipulate a jury. The one is against the law. And that's where you find out where the jury, you know, who they are, and you go and bribe them or extort them. That's generally frowned upon, right?
Just a little bit, yes.
But the second way is to tamper with the entire population so that the jury is seated with your sympathy. What did they do? They started calling lung cancer a lifestyle disease. Yeah. And by calling it a lifestyle disease, now you end up on the jury, and they hammer that point the whole time. Look, of course our product is dangerous, but you got to be a bit stupid to suck this stuff into your lungs anyway. This is a lifestyle disease. They were shifting after telling us that 3 out of 4 doctors recommend smoking cigarettes, after telling us that you've come a long way, baby, and as a woman, you need to start smoking. After all the manipulation, they then shifted the blame back to the consumer, and they invented the idea of lifestyle disease. And by the way, they own most of the food companies now. So we're in this place where if you're dealing with a lifestyle disease, you've been conditioned that it's your fault. It is not. But at the same time, you're the only one who can dig yourself out.
Yep, exactly. How do you have thoughts on how we do kind of reconcile ourselves, you know, genetically with where we are currently at in the environment and the food culture and all of that?
You know, genetics are really fascinating. And of course, marketing is also fascinating. And so marketing, the tighter the niche market you can market to, the more that individual niche market will respond to your message. So let's say, for example, you have a new dog and you're going to train it, and you go into the bookstore and you see a book that says Dog Training 101. Oh, I think I'll buy that. But then you walk around the corner and there's a whole case, and there's dog training for Dalmatians and dog training for Huskies. You're going to buy the one for your species. Now an author actually did this. And I can tell you that the book was 99% the same book, but one little chapter about that species. Like, if you're going to get a Husky, you need to know right now, don't take it off the leash. They run away, right? Little distinctions, right? So marketing really works that way. So one of the smartest things you can do if you want to market to people is find out, it's like when you're in the airport, you hear the announcements, the announcements are like this. Would Heather come to this? You hear your name in a heartbeat, right?
Right.
Well, so marketers understand that. And so what we want to do is go, eat right for your blood type. No, I'm sorry, but no. You can take any American on the standard American diet and put them on any of the 4 blood type diets, and their health will improve. any of
Right.
them. And so
Yes.
now the next version is get your genome tested, and then we'll tell you
Uh-huh.
your
Yeah.
perfect diet. Let me tell you something. Like, this is so fascinating. They just discovered a new anaconda in South America,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the largest snake in the world. And it's not that they've never found this
Nightmares.
big snake before. It's that they knew that there was a green anaconda, but now they realize that there's a species differentiating between the northern and southern green anacondas, and that one of them
Mm-hmm.
is significantly bigger on average than the other.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes a species differentiation? Well, they have about a 5% genetic difference between the two, right?
Okay.
They
Okay.
eat exactly the same thing. They have the same
Right.
diet. They live in the same basic environment,
Right.
just north and south. And they have a 5% genetic difference. Do you know what our genetic difference from chimpanzees is? 2%.
Mm-hmm.
So we are more closely related to chimpanzees than the northern green anaconda is to the southern green anaconda. And I
Right.
would argue that we could probably do the same evaluation of the white rhino and the black rhino. The reason
Right.
I say this is that you can go get your genome tested, and what it might do, and I would stretch at this, is talk to you a little bit about food sensitivity. You
Mm-hmm.
might not be lactose intolerant. That doesn't mean that, bovine milk is a good idea. It just
Right.
means you don't
Right.
have that. Or you might be a little more gluten intolerant because you didn't come from the grain crescent. And so you don't have a few hundred or a few thousand years. It doesn't mean it's good for you. So
Yeah.
the genetic side, I would say this, that Homo sapiens are Homo sapiens, and we all require the same 13 vitamins, the same 16 minerals, the same
Mm-hmm.
9 amino acids, and the same fatty acids, and the same water. We have all basically the same requirements. Then there are little lifestyle adjustments. I would say that men and women are different. As an
Mm-hmm.
example, men really don't respond well to veganism after about 18 months. If they're not supplementing, it shows up. Listen, if you want to be a vegan, we have programs
Oh
for
no,
vegans.
I'd love to go down this road, but yeah, go ahead.
We support vegans, and we do the best
Do
we
you?
can, and we
Mm-hmm.
should talk. But women, they can last much
Yeah.
longer. Well,
Yeah.
there's evolutionary reasons for this. If you're very athletic, then you're going to have a different metabolic speed, but that doesn't change your vitamins and minerals requirement. It just
Right.
changes maybe the quantity. So
Right.
our version of this is that there is a fundamental core human diet, and that to the degree that you stick to that diet, you will have the best health experience and the best recovery from
Mm-hmm.
injury and disease. And the degree toward you wear off, go off that diet, is the degree to
Mm-hmm.
which you're going to suffer, and you're going to have a horrible and maybe early end of life process.
Yeah. So this would then move into the WILDFIT program that we haven't talked about specifically, but this is sort of the coaching program that you've had this for a while. I mean,
Now 10
WILDFIT's been
years.
going on. Yeah. Yeah. And I know that it has reached many, many people. But in it then, so what I hear you saying is there's sort of this maybe core diet that as humans, everyone in general could kind of follow, feel better, help in some of the lifestyle illnesses that we have going on within the WildFit program. Then is that where you kind of add in all the behavioral change stuff as
Yes.
well? Okay.
Yeah. So let's go back to my friend that I tried to help. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Then I got this phone call from Tony Robbins' company one day, and they said, "Could you come and teach business at our business mastery program?" At first, I thought it was a practical joke because I wasn't even a
Oh,
speaker.
this is awesome. Yeah.
But I went. I flew off to Fiji, and
Yeah,
I
for sure.
got to
You
meet.
say
And
yes.
Tony was amazing. He was so good to me in every possible way.
Cool.
And then he booked me for a year of events to speak at.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I was so inspired by that afterward I got into teaching business, mostly in Northern Europe. It happens to be where the demand was. But my clients kept asking me, like, you never do jet lag. And because I could arrive in a city and start teaching the next morning, and I was fine. And I'm on stage sometimes 10, 12 hours, and I don't run out of energy, and they don't see me snacking on garbage. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'm even fasting while I do that. So they're all blown away, and they're going, how do you do that? So I started reluctantly sharing my core nutritional principles with people. And then guess what? I'd go back 6 months later and I'd see that they hadn't applied them. And I was like, it made me like, I don't even want to do this. And I'm not writing a diet book. The world does not need another diet book,
Right.
And the average person, by the way, there's a big study done, published in the United Kingdom. There was the average person will undertake 2 diets a year throughout their life, and they will stick to each one for about 6 or 7 days. So I was not interested in that.
Yeah. It doesn't work.
Exactly. And so one day I took a look at the way we did our business programs, and we found out something really stunning about our business program is that we had like an 80 to 90% completion rate on a 90-day
Mm-hmm.
coaching program. And that's very
That's
unusual for video,
amazing.
very
Mm-hmm.
unusual. I mean, the
Yeah.
industry average is 3 to 6%. So, so I
Yeah.
thought,
It's
wait a
huge.
second now. I know why that program is sticky because it uses something called behavioral change dynamics that I developed. It's a system of designing. It's basically user experience. It's how do you
Mm-hmm.
design a retreat, a seminar, a video program that is sticky and transformative. And
Right.
so I then went away and I thought, well, what if I just create that same structure but for nutrition? And so
Yeah.
I went to my team and I said, I'm going to do this. And they go, Eric, you're a business teacher. You have no business. What are
In
you
that
doing?
space.
And I said, I know, but I just feel really called to do it. I see these people and they're
Mm-hmm.
suffering. And by the way, they were in much better health than the average American at that stage, but I could see the
Yeah.
American food stuff coming across. Like I lived in England for 10 years and I
Oh,
watched everybody
sure.
gain 30 pounds while I was there. It was
Sure.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I went to my team. My team was reluctant, but in the end they supported me. And I announced the program and took 8 people through it.
Mm-hmm.
And all 8 of them got really, really interesting transformations. And so I did it for another 8 people and then another 8 people. And each time I was making little adjustments. Then I got tired of saying the same things at every coaching session. So I went into the studio and I recorded the first version of WildFit so that
Mm-hmm.
the clients, so I wouldn't have to keep repeating myself. And so that the time I
Right.
spent with the clients was on their customizations, on their
Yeah. That's
coaching and
awesome.
accountability. And then it was just working really, really
Wow.
well. Then one of my clients said, can I tell my network about your program? We didn't even have a website.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
the only way you could buy it
That's
was if you're at
funny.
one of my business programs. And,
If
we
you were
were
in the
selling
know.
maybe
Yeah.
150 of them a year. It was a
Sure.
good little
Sure.
business. And
Yeah.
then this one friend of mine said, you better put up a website. I'm about to tell my network. And then 200 people signed up in about 3 days.
Oh.
And then
Oh,
about 3
wow.
weeks later, another 200 people signed up. And then Vishen Lakiani from Mind Valley
Yep.
did
Yep.
WildFit. And he told his network and 1,100 people signed up in a week. And all of a
Wow.
sudden we realized that my reluctance was wrong and that we needed to get
Yeah.
this message out into the world and that there was a way to do it that was going to be, that would be self-funding, that we could, that we'd actually be able to reinvest in the business. And so today, we're I think 100,000 clients in
Yeah.
100 countries around the world. The Canadian government gave me on the Senate floor, gave me a medal for the work that
Oh
we're
my
doing, improving
goodness.
the quality of
Oh,
people's
that's so
lives. And
cool.
it's been
Yeah.
a real honor journey.
Your idea of that program, I've heard you say this, that program is not necessarily a weight loss based program.
No,
Although I know you get great results with
it
weight loss through it.
is
Mm-hmm.
probably, and by the way, we're about a week away from starting clinical trials on diabetes, but of course we're
Oh.
going to get all the weight loss
Oh.
stats from that as well. I would
Sure.
argue, and I'd love for anybody to stand up and challenge me so that we could
Mm-hmm.
compare, but I would argue that it is the single best weight loss program ever designed, but it was
Yeah.
never designed for that. It was designed
Right.
for correcting your relationship with food. And as
That's
it
where I was
turns
going.
out, if you are well nourished and you run proper metabolic balance, then what happens is your body gains weight where it needs it and it loses weight where it doesn't. And so you right size.
That relationship with food part within, and you don't need to give details of the program or anything, but just where do you I guess where did you get this idea of relationship with food? And are you specifically targeting then the behaviors around food, or are you diving more into the deeper psychology of it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
There are a couple, there's many facets to that. So for example, the one thing we have to do is uncouple and deframe the food industry hypnosis.
Yep.
Right. So we do a lot of work on that so people can see
Cool.
between the lines. It's almost like once you've seen the Matrix, it's like,
Yeah, you
so
can't unsee it.
yeah. And so we the first bit is to get, basically to get our clients to understand the world they're living in. And I'll tell you one of the reasons. It's an emotional thing. If I ask you to give up sugar, say, and by the way, we would never ask our clients to give anything up permanently. We are all about freedom. We just give them
Yeah,
guidelines on things to experiment with. And so let's say I ask you to give up sugar, for a week, and now you go to the grocery store and you pick up your favorite jar of ragu tomato sauce or whatever it is that you like to eat. And so you look at it and then you see that sugar is the number 2 ingredient.
Yeah.
Before I work with you, then you're likely to look at that. And I'm sure you're already way past this, but the average person, they look at the ingredient and they see sugar and they're disappointed.
Right.
They're disappointed and frustrated because I wanted to buy this and it's my favorite. And now I have lack. Now I have deprivation. Now I feel
Yep.
controlled. And their inner rebel is going to kick in and they're going to eat it.
Well,
Once they begin to understand that it is actually appropriate to add a little bit of sugar to tomato sauce because you want to counterbalance the acidity in the tomatoes. And there's a whole other conversation about that. But it is absolutely not necessary for it to be the number 2 ingredient on that label.
Exactly.
And the reason that it's there is that sugar stimulates your appetite. They are trying to make you hungry so that you buy more. Once you know that, now you go into the grocery store, you see sugar, and you're not disappointed. You're pissed off.
Right. Anger.
And if you get angry, then now you rebel against them instead of the rules. So it's a subtle shift, but it changes
it's huge.
so much. So we do a lot of work around that, the food industry, you know, decoupling people from the food industry. Then the next bit we dive into is really truly understanding your emotional states. And I'll give you one of the most powerful food principles that exists, and it's part of the evolutionary mismatch we're living in. A couple of weeks ago, we're rescuing a rainbow boa constrictor snake here in the Dominican Republic. So we're walking through the forest, and it's quite a long hike. And as we get to this one section of the forest, there are some cacao trees in that area, and they happen to have some ripe cacao fruit on them. So we're breaking the cacao open and we're eating the cacao fruit. And for those of you who don't know cacao fruit, it's the plant that they make chocolate from. But we're not eating the seed; we're eating the flesh around the seed. They don't use that for the chocolate.
Yeah.
And so we're eating these, and they're so delicious. They're so delicious. What are we getting? We're getting serotonin and dopamine. Why? Well, because the body is rewarding you for doing something good, right? Because in nature, every calorie you can find is a good calorie for more or less. So, but the other reason for the serotonin and the dopamine is that emotion is the glue that causes your memory to stick and locks your geographic memory. So now you produce all the serotonin and dopamine, and your body goes, I will remember this place.
Yes.
Right? Because if you can remember that place, it means next year your chances of survival are better. No kidding. About 4 hours later, we've released the snake in the wilderness. We're walking back from the waterfall, and we're walking along. And my then 6-year-old daughter, we're just basically approaching that section of the forest. It looks like any other section of the forest. She goes, we're in the cacao forest. Instantly, her Paleolithic brain was remembering where the fruit trees were. It was supposed to be that way. And when we begin to understand that that's the way the emotions work, then the next bit of it is that now you understand why McDonald's put a jungle, like a playground in their parks, because the kids go there and they have all this dopamine and serotonin, dopamine, and they anchor the smell, which is a bottled thing, right? They anchor the smell and the golden arches with all these feel-good chemicals. And that's why now they're 38 years old and they had a shitty day at work and they pull into the drive-through and they don't even know why they're doing it. So again, now there's the emotional side and then how the food industry is taking advantage of that. But there's one more that's even more stunning. And it's this. When you do something amazing, you know, I like James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, fabulous. And
love that book. Yeah, love him.
Great.
Yeah.
And then I see all these people debating, is it 61 days to create a habit? Is it 21 days to create a habit and all this kind of stuff? Let me dispel that whole thing for you. It doesn't take any number of days to create a habit. It takes a certain amount of emotional engagement. So
love that.
As an example, let's imagine you have a rookie playing in the World Series, baseball, say. And he's not really expecting to play. It's the World Series, but somebody gets injured. And in the final game, the bases are loaded, but they're 2 points behind, whatever, right? And he gets asked to go up to bat in an emergency. He hits the ball, hits it out, home run, wins the World Series. Does he celebrate? He absolutely does. Does the team celebrate him? Absolutely. Does the city celebrate him? Yes. And he's getting goosebumps all over his body and he's feeling amazing. And his brain instantly goes, how did I do this? Because that's a survival mechanism for how did I find this honey? How did I kill this mammoth? The brain goes, how did I do this? And it's like, it goes back and looks at, say, the last 24 hours of your behavior, and it's looking for things that you did that might have led to this magic. So his brain looks back. Oh, look, I was in the locker room. I tied my left shoe first.
Yep.
I tied my right shoe second, but I did bang my head on the locker in between them. That kid is going to tie his left shoe first for the rest of his career, and he's going to bang his head on the locker for good luck. He did not need 21 days to create that habit. He needed intense emotional experience.
Oh, that's a huge point.
We do this badly. We have a horrible day at work. and we come home and have wine or
Yeah.
ice cream or chocolate. And then the body goes, oh my God, look at all these calories. How did I manifest this?
Yeah.
Oh, look, I had a shitty day at work and I got angry at somebody in traffic. From now onwards, if we want lots of calories, all we have to do is trick this body into being depressed or sad or angry. And so the life hack, the life-changing life hack is, if you want to eat something, say that you think of as naughty, you want to eat a high calorie, whatever it is, only ever do that to reward behaviors that you want to repeat.
Keeps you in that cycle of being able to create those sustainable, those lasting changes there.
Yeah. And your body will
for
take a
sure.
look and go, wow, I'm eating a bowl of ice cream right now. What did I, and look, I wouldn't eat a bowl of ice cream, but look,
No, I get it.
we're here
Yeah,
about
yeah.
freedom. And the body goes, oh, I'm getting all this fat and I'm getting all this sugar. That's a good thing. Remember, the body doesn't know. And then it goes,
Exactly.
what did I do to create this? And it looks back and it goes, oh, I'm a sales guy and I made 58 phone calls today instead of only 28.
Right.
And so then the body starts to unconsciously go, on days that we do 58 phone calls, good things happen.
I think too, just that education piece on how our whole nervous system, our brain and body responds so unconsciously, but bringing that into the consciousness and just educating can be so incredibly helpful for anyone wanting to make change around food. There is a piece of, I really hesitate to use the word addiction process, but there is, I think I've been thinking about that a lot, like where that is with food and creating those cycles within our brain and body and nervous system, and emotion is always at the heart of all of those things, for sure.
Very much.
Okay. So let me ask you, maybe a little controversial. We touched on it a little bit ago, but you brought up the word vegetarian or veganism or something. I'm really just curious, where are you at with that? I'm not sure if WILDFIT in particular talks about that. You said, it can be doable, but thoughts on, it's such a controversy right now. So I just wanted to bring it up.
So in our WILDFIT community, we have many vegetarians and vegans. In fact, I was stunned one day to find a Facebook group called WILDFIT for Vegans or something, and it had like 2,000 people in it or something. And I didn't understand that, but our view is this. We want to support people in having a healthy, functional relationship with food. And the gift we give people is what we call food freedom, which is the ability to never eat things that you regret and never miss out. It's to eat what you want when you want, as much as you want, and feel good about it. And the only way you can do that is if you have a functional relationship with food. Now, some of our clients come in and they don't want to eat animal products, and they have three primary reasons for not wanting to do that: the environment, perceptions about health, and animal rights, and we can discuss those things. We are not advocating for veganism. We will never take somebody who is eating animal products and recommend that they go to veganism. We don't regard it as an optimal lifestyle. We regard it as a choice that you've made that we will then do what we can to support you in maintaining, but we will support you in maintaining it by supplementing, because there's no question you're going to need that. Or we will support you in trying to help you break your ideology about it. Now, there are different types of vegans. There are ideological vegans, and then there are sort of socially conscious vegans, and then there are misguided vegans, and there's a bunch of different ones. The ideological ones are the problem, and what I mean by that is that once you become ideological about something, it means that you're willing to sacrifice your health for your ideology. And that's where you've seen these horrible things on social media, where you see these vegans, like you watch their pictures over the space of 6-7 years and they waste away, because once they became ideological, guess what? They can't go supplement B12. They can't go supplement iron, because that would be proof that their ideology is broken. So what we try and do is say, look, we're going to recommend to you on this program that you relabel yourself as a flexitarian and not necessarily a vegetarian, or not necessarily a vegan. And that might mean that at certain stages of the program, if you experience hunger, because people should never feel hungry when they're on our program, ever. And so if you feel a little hunger, it's harder when you're a vegan. I mean, think about this. How often, and by the way, I'm not a fan of full carnivorism either, by the way.
Me either. So
we'll come back to that. But let's just compare, how often does a lion eat and how often does an elephant eat? Well, a lion eats once a day, once every 2 or 3 days. That's it. How often does an elephant eat? 23 hours of the day. That's how inefficient
constant
grass is.
Right.
They are basically all an elephant really is a grass redistribution machine. It goes and eats grass and bark and redistributes it. Now, in our world, if you're going to be vegan, you're going to be doing a lot of eating, a lot,
Yeah.
like way
Right.
and consistently, and you're also still going to be missing core things. So we support them going both ways. What I would say is that if you think of the spectrum of herbivorism, veganism,
Yep.
but in nature it's called being herbivore.
Yep.
And then you go all the way over to a carnivore and you think of it as a spectrum, and it really is a spectrum. Because here's an example. If you're an elephant, you eat about 200 kilograms, which is, say, what is that? 450 pounds of grass, bark, and seasonal fruits every day.
Yeah,
Every
it's amazing.
day. And you drink about 70 liters of water. I don't know what that means in gallons, but a lot.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Now, here's something most people haven't thought about. How many grubs and insects and larvae are in 450 pounds of bark and grass?
Right.
And when they suck up all the water, how many tadpoles and fish eggs and so you got to figure that out of, say, 450 pounds, they're probably eating half a pound of insect material every day. So then you have to do this next thought experiment, which is impossible to do, but let's do it anyway. In fact, I think it's being done to some degree, but let's imagine that we could veganize their food. It's awful that they eat the insects. So we go clean all the insects off their food. And so they could be eating their proper herbivore diet. What would likely happen to those elephants? Bad, terrible things, because they likely have a level of nutritional dependence on those insects, even though they don't specifically aim to target for them. So if we remove them, and here's a shocking truth about elephants and basically animals that live in captivity is bad. I mean, if you're a goldfish, you can pull it off, but the rest of animals don't like it. It's so true that elephants working in slave conditions in forestry areas in Thailand live longer than zoo elephants. They live longer than zoo elephants. It's a shocking truth, right? And so I would suggest one of the reasons is zoo elephants are eating hay and they're not getting their
Right.
So if you look at that spectrum, I would say at one end you have veganism, at the other end you have carnivorism. I can tell you right now, if you told me I had to go live on a desert island for the rest of my life and I had to pick one extreme or the other, I'll take carnivorism all day long.
Yeah.
That said, we know for certain. I saw this Instagram reel the other day, and the guy says, the interviewer says, well, there are those people who say that we are traditionally hunter-gatherers, and so we ate both meat. And the guy goes, that assumes facts that aren't in evidence. Humans, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude knows nothing. Who domesticated potatoes and tomatoes and squash and cacao for that matter? People. We've clearly had a seasonal relationship with plants. And so my view of that is that we are supposed to not have a plant-based diet. We're supposed to be more having a meat-based diet or an animal product-based diet that is supplemented by seasonally available fruits and vegetables from time to time.
Yeah, I love that. Very clear cut, also very inclusive. And I think, dare we say moderation? I'm not sure where that word is these days, but so that's great. What about on a practical level? 3 basic changes maybe you'd give to someone who's really trying to biggest bang for their buck. They're really trying to change their health. They're really trying to make some significant changes.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is this, that I want to share one principle and then the 3 things.
Yeah, go ahead.
The principle is, and it's a principle that you certainly can live by and it can help a great deal, because what's going on right now is that the food industry is confusing us because do you remember the game Risk? So the food industry is basically playing a game of Risk with our plate. The meat people are trying to get their share, and the grain people are trying to get their share, and the dairy people are trying to get in Canada, they've pushed the dairy people off into a they've pushed them away. They're like, not necessary. You can sit over there. So, but they're all playing with this, right? So what that means is that one day bread is good for you, and the next minute bread is bad. Wine is good, wine is bad. Eggs are good, eggs are bad. Meat is good, meat is bad. And on. So what we want to do is there's one principle that can clean all of that up for us, and the principle works like this: any food principle, any food idea, any study that you read about, any fad that violates what we know about human history and evolutionary biology must be considered suspect. It doesn't mean for sure that it's wrong, but it
Right.
has
But
to be suspect and require
yeah,
deeper thought.
consider it.
So if somebody
Sure.
says to you, avocados are essential to your health and your pregnancy, you go, well, hold on now. The first time any of us ate avocados is in the last 100 years, 200 years. Like,
Right.
they're brand new to humans. So they cannot be essential. It doesn't mean they're not
Totally.
good. I actually think they are, but they're definitely
Sure.
not essential. So that principle, if everybody just takes that one principle on, I think they
I
can
love
change
that.
a lot. So then let's go to the three next things. The next one is also built on a WILDFIT principle. And the WILDFIT principle is your health is far more determined by you getting enough of the good stuff than it is by you eliminating the bad stuff.
I've heard you say this. I love this one.
It's
Yeah. Yep.
Now you can just turn Instagram off because everybody's out there. Avoid these 7 dangerous food. If it's
Nope, I
white, get it
agree.
out of sight. Like,
Yep.
no, it's all fear-based marketing, and it works because
Exactly.
it's good clickbait. But
Yep.
the fact of the matter is the average person is already malnourished. And so if
I
we now
agree.
take away what, then we're going to push them to starvation, and that's going to lead to relapse and binging.
Yes.
And no. So
Yes.
instead, action step number one that everybody can take is to focus on getting their fundamental needs met, getting good water, getting good air, getting good nutrition, which comes from seasonally available fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, and meat, fish, eggs, and poultry if they're in your experience. That's the first one. Second step is we already shared it. Only ever reward emotional states that you want to repeat. So never. And you know what? I want to share a story, which maybe you've heard because I've shared it before, but I want to share it anyway because it hammers the point.
Love to hear it.
2 Christmases ago, I was here and I had my girlfriend here, the most lovely and amazing angel in the world, and her 2 daughters who are my stepdaughters, and my little girl who was 6 at the time, and then my partner's sister and one of her daughters. So you're seeing what's going on is we're having the use of estrogen and
estrogen. That's what I was thinking. There's a lot of estrogen going on.
I'm the only guy in the house, and
sure.
And the truth of the matter is, it was wonderful. It was just the most amazing holiday season. It was fabulous. And then January rolls around, and slowly but surely they start heading back to their different
Sure.
And now one day the last of them leave, and I'm down to I've just got my little girl. And I've got my little girl on Friday, and she's going to go stay with her mom on Friday afternoon. So I'm going to lose her. And I'm kind of happy about that. Like, I don't mean happy about losing
you're ready.
her. Like, I've had women in my house for like 6 weeks. It's time for man day. I'm going to take a bath in a tub of whiskey. I mean, of course not. But,
That's
and I'm going to watch Liam Neeson rescue his daughter from
there. You go.
With a certain
some violence.
I'm in. But I wake up on Saturday morning and I feel crap. I'm depressed and I'm sad and I don't even know why. I live a great life. What is going on? And I walk out of my bedroom and I walk into the living room and I look across the kitchen, and immediately my little subconscious mind, we call it the food devil in WILDFIT. The food devil says, Eric, you have all the ingredients to make Grace. Now, Grace is an outstanding smoothie.
And this is a food.
Especially when it's frozen. It's almond butter and dates. A little vanilla extract.
Sounds delicious.
Bloody good. And it's not even all that bad for you, but it is a major fat and sugar bomb for sure. Good fats, good sugar, but
sure.
But here's what I noticed. The minute my voice said that, I started to feel better. This is an important thing to understand about food.
Yeah.
I hadn't even started eating the food yet, and I'm already starting to feel better. Then my other voice, my food angel, says, we don't reward emotional states we don't want to repeat.
Yeah.
And the devil basically said, the devil was not happy with that comment.
Yeah.
I'm now arguing with myself inside. And the angel lays down the law. And he says, you can only have grace if you have a fantastic day. And the devil's like, well, that's impossible with the way I feel right now. And I started walking toward the living room. I'm just going to go binge watch something on Netflix.
Right.
And then the angel goes, Netflix doesn't lead to grace.
Right.
So what might lead to grace? I walk outside into the sun to go onto the beach. I don't have any plan, but I know that I need to do something to have a better day. Then I noticed that, the tide's coming in and I like making sandcastles. So I'm sitting there on the sand, just kind of half-heartedly making a sandcastle, but soon I'm actually making a sandcastle, and it's big, it's 12 feet across. Then the tide is coming in, it's attacking, and then a crab has moved into the one, Cedric, his name was Cedric, and he moved into the, and then 2 of my friends walk by and they need a tour of the castle because it's so big and they're so impressed. And I've been on this for hours and I've had all this fresh air and sun. I'm feeling amazing. And they go, do you want to go get some lunch? We walk over to our local, beachfront place. We have have the most amazing lunch. We laugh, we tell jokes, we tell stories, we share strategies, we have a great time. And I walk back into my house and Mood Angel says, now you can have grace. I don't really feel like it anymore.
It's, yeah.
And that's the cycle
wonderful.
Right there. So that second principle is only reward emotional states and behavior that you want to repeat. If you are feeling sad, call somebody, don't eat the chicken.
I love that. I love that.
And then the third one is build a social structure around you that supports you and your health goals.
Huge.
One of the biggest breakthroughs we got with WildFit was I never coached people one-on-one. And the joke is I did that because there was no money in it. Like, honestly, if I'm straight out, people were willing, we tested and we found out people were willing to pay $1,500 to do WildFit the way we were selling it 20 years ago. Now, WildFit can be concierge based. We have some coaches that charge $3,200 for it because they add a bunch of service. But back then, that was the price point that we found. And there was no way to justify that. I couldn't commit that much time. But if I put 8 people in one class, then $1,500 made sense. But as a bonus of that decision, what we realized and what we found was that the 8 class was much better and more effective than one-on-one because they became each other's support structure. In the same way that if you go to the gym alone or you go to a gym as a class or with a trainer, you push a little harder, right? And so build a social structure of people that are interested in health.
Eric, I love that. I love all 3 of those. And I love the principle about just really thinking about all these things through and being able to apply. I mean, I like that you gave some practical strategies. I really appreciate that.
I'm all about that.
I also really want to respect your time. I could talk to you forever, but I do want to respect your time. I really, really appreciate you being here and sharing all of your knowledge. Can you tell us maybe a little bit about where, because you do have a book coming out, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and
I actually have 2, and one we've already talked a little bit about, and that's called The Evolution Gap. And there's kind of a funny story there that I've been working on this book for a long, long time, and then I had a very scary situation happen when I was out with the Hadzabe people once. Basically, it's a longer story for maybe another interview one day, but I basically got stranded out in the wilderness with the Hadzabe people far from everywhere. And I had an out-of-body experience that made me, somehow allowed me to take all the research that I'd done and put it into a framework. And so I wrote the book, The Evolution Gap. And then we found that some guy issued a press release that he was from Oxford and he was planning on releasing a book on the same topic under the same title. And I went to my publisher and I said, look, I want to get this book out really fast. And they said, we just can't hit that cycle. So I got them to sign a release that I could publish it myself so that we could just sort of get first to market. And so that book, The Evolution Gap, but here's the cool thing for anybody listening. Of course, if you're listening to this next year, too late. But if you're listening now, the version that's up there is basically the director's cut. What I mean by that is that the publishers told us we need to take about 55,000 words out of the book because it's too long for print. And so the version that's on Amazon now is like the director's cut. It's the full thing.
Oh, it's the
re-edit, and we actually launch the book fully. It will be, let's say, it'll be a cut down version of it, and then there will be a second book. Where right now it's all up there. So you can go get it on Amazon. We have not launched to any major fanfare, so this is only maybe the second time I've mentioned on the podcast. It's there you go. So I was
going to say I didn't even know it was out. Otherwise, I would have said something. But okay, I get it. Yeah,
there you go. And there's 2 ways you can get it. One way is if you go to theevolutiongap.com, you can pre-order the print version. I can't give you a deadline on when that'll come out, but that's one way to get it. And then the other way is just to go to Amazon and order the Kindle version that's sitting there right now. I kind of prefer you do that one, because then you can go write a review, and I'd love that.
Oh, sure. Of course. Yes.
The second book is coming out with Hay House on March 26th, and it's called Post-Diabetic. And I just want to share a little bit about my co-author.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ruben Ruiz. And the reason that's a very important thing is that one of the reasons I didn't write a book earlier is because not a doctor, not a PhD, not a nutritionist. This has all been self-study. And, and the reality is that some people in the population are willing to accept you based on your results, but some people want certain pieces of paper. And so anyway, Ruben, his story was that he was a medical internist. He was an assistant professor of medicine at UCLA and now running 3 medical clinics in Southern California. And like many doctors in America, 40 pounds overweight, on 10 prescription medications, hypertensive, type 2 diabetic. So he's driving to work one day and he's really tired. So he pulls into Starbucks, gets himself a coffee to try to stay awake, still falls asleep. And he's in a car wreck. Luckily,
Oh,
nobody's
wow.
hurt too badly. And a few days later, he's in a rental car because his car's kind of messed up and still
Right.
tired, like he is every day, like he is every
Mm-hmm.
afternoon. And he pulls into Starbucks to buy another bottle of another cup of energy. Doesn't keep him awake. Falls asleep. Gets into another accident. 2 in a week.
Wow.
And
Wow.
at this point, he has a serious crisis of conscience, and he really has to ask himself, "What business do I have being a doctor when I can't even heal thyself?"
Mm.
Like he's
Right.
really suffering physically, emotionally, and also professionally. And so he found
Mm-hmm.
his way onto the internet, and he found one of my master classes, and then he went into the
Mm.
WILDFIT program. 90
Oh,
days
cool.
later, he felt completely compelled to get on my calendar, and there he was on my calendar. And that's how I heard this story. Why? Because he'd lost 40 pounds. He'd reversed his type 2 diabetes. He'd reversed his hypertension, and he got off 9 of his 10 prescription medications. And he did it in 3 months. He got off the
Wow.
10th prescription medication a few months later, but
Mm-hmm.
he became absolutely compelled at that point to get this message out in the world, because he said in
Mm.
all his years at medical school and teaching at medical school,
Mm-hmm.
nobody, basically the approach was, look, prediabetes means you might be able to avoid type 2, but once you're type 2, it's chronic.
Right. Right. You can't reverse it,
And
which,
it
right.
is,
Mm-hmm.
it is,
So,
our favorite hashtag is post-diabetic is possible. And
yes,
post-diabetic is a
absolutely.
medical condition that we propose exists. And post-diabetic is somebody who was type 2 or pre-diabetes and have
Mm-hmm.
improved their blood sugar numbers significantly, that they are clearly trending in the other direction. And at that point, that they are no longer type 2 diabetic, they don't recede back to pre-diabetes. They then
Mm-hmm.
become post-diabetic, which means they
I
should
love
not be
it.
prescribable. They do not need
Right.
medication. They're headed in the right direction. And when I introduced this idea to Mark Hyman, I'm sure you're
Oh,
familiar with
yeah. I
Mark.
know who he is. Yep.
He
Mm-hmm.
immediately, he and I were talking, and I mentioned
Mm-hmm.
post-diabetic, and he goes, "That's a really good idea. Can I use that?" And at
Oh,
that point, I'm like, yeah. But in the meantime, I'm registering the domain. I was like, because it
yeah,
never occurred to
exactly.
me that it was. And so
Sure.
in the end,
A
the book is
thing.
called Post-Diabetic,
Oh,
an easy
great.
to follow
Okay.
9-week guide to reversing pre and type 2 diabetes. And my co-author
Excellent.
is Ruben Ruiz, who is a medical doctor who
Hmm.
reversed his diabetes. So he's the best testimonial in the world.
Okay, excellent. So March 26th, that will be out.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you're doing. You're doing the great work here in the world, I believe. Super interesting guy. I will at the end of this do a little conclusion for the listeners, just everywhere they can find you, all your social media and stuff like that. But I really appreciate your time and you sharing all your expertise.
No worries. Thanks so very much. Thanks for
You bet.
having me. And really, it was a lot of fun.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Eric. Like I said, he's a great storyteller, so that makes it a lot of fun. I also hope you could really pull some practical strategies out of that information, just things maybe that inspire you to try to change something small on the daily basis to just improve your health and well-being. And I'm going to give you Eric's social media if you want to follow him, follow his work, know when exactly his 2 books will be released and where you can get them. And I'm just going to read off for you right here so I don't mess this up, what his handles are. And I believe as I'm reading this, they're actually all his names. So on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, they are all Eric Edmeades. So ERIC, and then Edmeades is EDMEADES. So Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon. Hi, everyone. Guess what? I have a lovely discount code just for you, my listeners. The code is 10 off. That's 10OFF, and it will get you 10% off any one of my online courses, which now include Mastering Mindful Eating, Overcome Binge Eating, Overeating, and Emotional Eating for Good. And I also have a course on When You Want to Stop the Weight Loss Medication, a comprehensive guide to weight maintenance and mastery. So if you've maybe lost some weight using a medication and you're now wanting to go off the medication but keep the weight off, this is the course for you. And any course you buy, you keep the course for a minimum of 3 years, maybe longer. It just depends on how many are purchased. All courses are self-paced, and I promise you they are practical, meaning they don't just tell you what you need to do. You actually engage in the skills and strategies needed to make actual lasting behavior change. You learn how to do the what. Okay, all courses have multiple modules with multiple lessons. All include lots of examples, tips, and tricks to make things simple and clear. And you also get lots of downloadable resources, including the daily planning template that I use with my own clients, the exact protocol to use after a binge or an overeat has occurred to minimize its damage on your body and your mind. There are protein cheat sheets, research-based journaling prompts, and the literal how-to checklists on the skill you are learning about. And with the weight maintenance course, you also have a movement module that will help you figure out how to make a movement plan that fits your particular lifestyle and level of fitness. And you also have a natural appetite regulation module. So whether if you have never tried an online course to change behavior, or if you have, I just highly would recommend that you try one of these. I've put my heart and soul into both of them. They are all research-based, and now you can get 10% off. So again, that code is 10OFF. If you're ready to make changes that last, you can go to my website, heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And from the main menu, click courses, and it will get you to where you want to go. Or you can click on the links in the episode description below the show. And again, as soon as you're there, when you're ready for checkout, just enter the code 10OFF, 10 off. And just a reminder, I also have an ebook cookbook that is now available. It's called Protein Forward Easy Recipes. It includes all high protein recipes, including breakfast and sweet treats full of protein, and lunches and dinner. Okay, so again, head to my website. It's probably the easiest thing to do. heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen. And from there, go to courses or the cookbook. And again, use code 10 off at checkout. Did you know you can find a lot more help from me on my website? Go to heatherheynen.com. Heynen is spelled Heynen, and there you will find links to my online courses, how I work with clients one-on-one, as well as online with my coaching and counseling services that I offer. The information in this podcast is intended to provide a broad understanding and knowledge of healthcare topics. This information is for educational purposes only and should not be considered complete and should not be used in place of advice from your physician or healthcare provider. We recommend you consult your physician or healthcare professional before beginning or altering your personal exercise, diet, or supplementation program.